Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 34 deadline decisions. This is a weekly series where I take you through your final questions and dilemmas ahead of the deadline, and in today's video we'll discuss the press conference updates, captaincy, bench boost, free hit, transfers and much more. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, as always, I'm going to start this video with the press conference updates. And if you are enjoying these videos on a Friday this season, the new deadline decisions series that I started for this season, please do smash that like button. And if you are new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. There's about 5 long form videos and a stream every single week now. So plenty of content, and this will continue into next year because you guys seem to really enjoy these videos. And therefore, yeah, let's start with the press conference updates. And we actually got some seriously important press conference updates for Game Week 34. So this is not absolutely everything from every manager, but this is just the notable stuff that I picked out for FPL. So firstly, Wolves. I love Gary O'Neill because he gave it to us straight, but there were quite a few surprises. So Neto is now back out on the grass. That is Pedro Neto. So he should be featuring again this season, which is great for him and great for Wolves, but unlikely to be a feature in Game Week 34. Now is when we get onto the actual FPL chaos. So Ait-Nouri could be available for the bench. So it sounds like he's still struggling with this calf issue, I think he has. By the way, there seems to be a lot of calf issues in the Wolves squad, but Ait-Nouri seems to still be struggling with this issue that he has. And therefore, he's, I guess, has a possibility of being on the bench. But the way that Gary O'Neill worded this was pretty much he's very unlikely to start. Could be in the squad, could be on the bench. And therefore, it's difficult. If you own Ait-Nouri, do you keep him? Do you start him? Because what he's probably got is a maximum of 1 start in this double. Now, because of the order of the games, I'd still be pretty likely to start Ait-Nouri if I owned him already. I wouldn't bring him in and I wouldn't select him on the free hit. But it's Arsenal and then Bournemouth. And you have to remember that you probably weren't expecting that much from the Arsenal game anyway. So if he comes off the bench against Arsenal and starts against Bournemouth, he's pretty much a single game week player against Bournemouth at home, which is pretty good. I suppose the concern would be what happens if he doesn't start against Arsenal, but also doesn't start against Bournemouth, then you've got a bit of an issue because you may be only getting like 10 minutes off the bench. But if I owned Ait-Nouri, unless I had a really good option on the bench or 2 free transfers and nothing else to do with them, I'd probably just keep him and start him. Hwang is kind of in a similar position, it sounds like. Apparently Hwang is available, but only for 45 minutes tops. So what I would suggest based on that is he's either going to start and get 45 and come off at half time, which isn't a normal thing for a player, but it could be the way that Gary O'Neill wants to do this, or in a similar way to Ait-Nouri, probably makes the bench and then comes on in the second half. Either way, I think Hwang is a similar one to Ait-Nouri for me, where if you own him, you keep him and you start him, unless you've got some other good options, but I wouldn't go out there and buy him. Again, due to the fact that the game that you really want him for is the second one against Bournemouth, not necessarily against Arsenal anyway. So this wouldn't make me, anyway, in my personal opinion, unless you've got 2 free transfers to use, sell Ait-Nouri or Hwang, but it's obviously not ideal if you do own them. Semedo was the interesting one that we weren't expecting. So Semedo is now out with an overload to his calf. Doesn't sound particularly serious, but looks like it'll at least keep him out for the first game of Game Week 34. And now here is when we get into the big one, which is Cunha. And you've probably heard this already. You can see by the thumbnail. Cunha is out for Game Week 34, or at least the first game of Game Week 34. I don't think it was confirmed for both, but he's out for the first one. And therefore, if he's completely out for the first one, and the second game's only a few days later, I think Cunha is one that you would be happy selling, unfortunately, if you do own him. And again, if you're on free hit, you're definitely not selecting him now. You definitely don't transfer him in. It sounds like he's taken damage to his calf muscle. Essentially, apparently his calf was kicked, but it's actually caused damage to the muscle. So it sounded like, based on the wording of the press conference, that Cunha's issue was slightly worse than Semedo's. And if both of them are out and Cunha's is slightly worse, my early prediction, we might get an update later today exactly on how long he's out for, but it doesn't look good for Cunha. So sadly, because he was a really good option, I think, for double Game Week 34, Cunha's probably not an option for us now. Dawson is also out having an operation as well. So basically, I think Gary O'Neill said he's got 10 senior players fit and available for this game. One of the players that is actually going to feature in the squad apparently was very happy that he got to train with the first team because it meant that he missed science. They have a literal school child training with the first team because they have so many injuries. So what this tells me is not only would I probably steer clear of all Wolves assets if you're choosing from fresh right now, but it is absolutely critical to get the best 3 Arsenal assets for this Wolves game, the players that are actually going to start and play, because they could absolutely feast here. So not good for Wolves, very good for Arsenal in the first game of the double. Moving on to Manchester City. I don't know if we were necessarily expecting this, although we did see Erling Haaland limp off. So Kevin De Bruyne and Haaland both requested to be subbed around the same time towards the back end of the game before extra time for Manchester City. Apparently, Kevin is absolutely fine. He was just exhausted and fatigued. But Erling Haaland did feel something. He did have a slight injury. So apparently it was a muscular issue. And there is a big typo to something there. I do apologise. So this now calls into question a few things. If you've got Haaland, do you sell him? I think it's a lot easier to sell him if you're wildcarding 35. Otherwise, I'd have difficulty doing so. Do you wait for an update? I think the good thing about Man City is that their game against Brighton is actually next Thursday. So 6 days from the day of me recording this, because they've got the FA Cup semi-final at the weekend. So actually, it's not a couple of days that Haaland and De Bruyne have to recover. They've got pretty much an entire week from when they played the Champions League game. And I think that there's a good chance that we might get an update ahead of the deadline around Erling Haaland. But I don't know. I mean, he's only got one fixture anyway. It's not a great game against Brighton. So there's definitely justification to say, hey, if you've got a free transfer, something like Haaland to Mateta or Haaland to Solanke or even Haaland to Darwin maybe could work out for you. But obviously, if he plays, it doesn't feel like the best use of a transfer because Haaland could outscore a lot of these doublers. So sadly, I don't have the best piece of advice on this other than just to say Haaland did feel something. It wasn't just him being a bit knackered. He felt something. And if it's something that he's felt in the past as well, it obviously wouldn't have been his foot, but it could be something where they give him a bit of a rest, or maybe they do try and play him in the FA Cup and then the rest that he gets actually against Brighton. I just don't know. But obviously not ideal if you're not on a free hit this week. Moving on to Liverpool. This is the full quote around Trent Alexander-Arnold. There obviously are other various things to discuss around Liverpool, but specifically on Trent, lots of people wondering, should they go for him? So this was actually directly after the game. So this wasn't a press conference today. This was after the game where they won 1-0 against Atalanta. Klopp said, if Trent had been a bit fitter, we could have gone a bit longer, but it is insane that he has even played. In the end, he was running out of gas, and he played 72 minutes in Europe. Now, I am seeing loads of different takes on this, and I guess it's how you want to frame it and how you want to interpret it. And this is a skill in FPL. Your prediction and expectation of minutes is one of the very few things that you can control. Because in this game, we've all got the same data available to us. We've all got the same eye test, essentially. We've all got the same fixtures to choose from. But prediction of minutes is actually something that's very, very important. So you predict based on this. My prediction based on this is I cannot see a world in which Trent starts 3 games in a row when it is insane that he's even played. I thought the quote was, it's insane that he played that long. It was just insane that he played in general. You have to remember, last week against Atalanta, Klopp said Trent was nowhere near being ready to play. He was only put on the bench because they could take 23 players. He then wasn't meant to come on as early as he was, but Bradley got injured. So he came on and played like 43 minutes. He's then started against Atalanta a few days later and played 72. Then you're expecting him to start 2 away games in a row after that away game. So is it like 4 away games in 10 days they've got? I just can't see a world in which Trent starts both in the double. But some people seem to think he will. So maybe I'm just blinded by my bias and my prediction of this. I suppose the very best case scenario you're hoping for from Trent is 60 minutes and 60 minutes. He could technically start a further 2 games and Klopp just brings him off when he starts to look fatigued again, because it doesn't sound like he's struggling with his injury. It does sound like he's struggling with fitness. And I've seen a few people say the only way that you get fit is by continuing to exercise, which is an obvious point. But it's like saying you should run a marathon every day in prep for actually running a marathon because that's the way you get fit. No, you need to give your body a chance to recover. So my prediction, and I could be wildly off with this, my prediction is that he starts against Everton, but he's benched against Fulham. So I think he'll be benched this weekend, and I think he'll start midweek, and then he'll probably start against West Ham as well. However, Trent starting one game and coming on as a sub in the other game, he could quite easily outscore the likes of Van Dijk and Alisson. So I wouldn't be surprised if he still gets you a good score, but I would personally be surprised if he does start both in the double based on that. I'd love to know down below, what are your interpretation of the Liverpool and Klopp quotes around Trent? On Manchester United, sorry for the loud engine outside, by the way. On Manchester United, Maguire, McTominay and Antony are expected to be fit for Sunday. I don't think that massively affects FPL. But the thing that does affect FPL is that Garnacho has apologised for liking the tweets that were criticising Ten Hag and also bringing up the fact that Ten Hag kind of threw Garnacho under the bus. So if you missed it, on social media, on Twitter or X, Garnacho liked 2 tweets by Mark Goldbridge, which basically suggested, number 1, that Ten Hag threw Garnacho under the bus, and the other one was basically criticising Ten Hag for bringing Garnacho off at half-time. He has subsequently unliked those, and apparently he has gone to Ten Hag and apologised, and Ten Hag has accepted the apology, and he has moved on. The reason I bring this up is because we saw the last time that there was a bit of beef between player and manager, that Sancho just didn't feature ever again for Manchester United. So the fact that Garnacho has apologised, I think, is a good thing. He is young. He's learnt from his mistake. Ten Hag cleared the air. I think we're pretty good. Basically, if you have Garnacho, I would still expect him to get a similar amount of minutes based on what we currently know. So he's fine as a pick, and I think he's fine to start this week. On Crystal Palace, there's nothing really that big in terms of information. Lerma is out until game week 36, which isn't ideal. He's played between sort of midfield and centre-back all season. More recently, he's been playing in defence. Him being out, I do think, makes them weaker as a unit, both going forward and defensively, probably even more so defensively. But they do have some players coming back. Ward and Hughes need to be assessed, and Chris Richards is back in training. So I think in general, nothing massive there that would change my opinion on Crystal Palace assets. I didn't see anything said around Elise and Eze's fitness, but I think our prediction is probably the same. Eze's minutes are definitely the best. We still expect Mateta to start both, but he might get some early subs for Edouard. And Elise is probably the least likely to start both. But my current prediction is I think there is a good chance that he does start both, but gets early subs in both games. Something like 70 and 60 minutes, I think is reasonable, but he won't definitely start two. And that's obviously where it then comes back to your expected minutes prediction. On Everton, again, maybe not many people selecting Everton assets, but Calvert-Lewin and Branthwaite were both involved in light training and came through it okay. So I think this is good news. If you've got Branthwaite and you've held him for this double, just given the kind of player that Branthwaite is and the fact this injury hasn't even kept him out for like a full week, I would expect Branthwaite to start as long as he gets through the next training session fine. And just the reason I mentioned Calvert-Lewin, you might want to take a punt, but I also saw one person with Beto in their team. I just wouldn't go for either striker now because I think they'll be rotated between the two of them. So Branthwaite, in my opinion, based on these quotes, I would expect to start, but also don't be massively surprised if he doesn't start the first and he starts the second. And if that's the case, the ordering isn't particularly good for Everton because it's Forest first and Liverpool second, but I would expect Branthwaite to start. On Brentford, the reason I bring this up again is lots of people still hanging on to Ivan Toney. He's got a good fixture this week. Do you play him? So apparently Ivan Toney is progressing and is desperate to start in game week 34, but Thomas Frank did not confirm if he would. I've got no idea how to interpret what's going on with Toney because at first we genuinely thought it was an injury, and then Thomas Frank said he was absolutely fine, but then he still didn't play him, and I just worry that there is something kind of like, he knows he's going to leave Brentford. They're slowly easing him out. There's no need for them to play him particularly. Or he might genuinely have an issue. But would I continue to hold on to Toney when there are some other really good options? Probably not. I'd probably be happy moving to a doubler this week or even moving to like an Isak or a Højlund. Because Toney, even if Toney starts, he's been absolutely rubbish since he came back to the Prem. He had the first few games since coming back from his suspension, he was really decent. But then since then, he's been very disappointing. So it's very difficult because you could just imagine him hauling the week that you sell him, but I would probably just be happy getting rid of Toney now. I don't think I'd hold on to him any longer. Finally, just to finish off Arsenal, apart from Yuri and Timber, who is still getting back to full fitness, Arsenal have a fully fit squad. I suppose that's good if you've got the likes of Gabriel and Ødegaard because apparently they've been suffering slightly recently. Looks like they're absolutely fine. But this isn't good in terms of the fact that it's going to be very difficult to predict who's actually going to start and who's not. So I think I've covered all of the key press conference updates there, but let me know if I've missed anything down below. Let's now move on to answering some of your key questions around Game Week 34. So guys, the first question comes in and they said, is it actually possible to ever decide on a third Liverpool and Arsenal player? And the answer is no. So the next question that came in was around those with no chips. And I think this is incredibly important because lots of us are kind of just ignoring the people that have used all of their chips. And they're like, if you're free hitting in 34, if you're wildcard in 35, or your bench boost 37. But some people are like, listen here, I've got rid of all my chips already. What do I do? And one of the questions was around like, what would your priority transfers be this week? And I do think it is entirely different if you're not free hitting, if you've got no wildcard, but also if you've got no bench boost in 37, because you don't have to have 15 doublers in 37, but also you've got a double right in front of you to attack and 35 too. So it does become very, very difficult. Whilst obviously Chelsea and Spurs are the next two teams to double after 34, you can't bring in Spurs assets this week and Chelsea play against Arsenal. So whilst longer term they would suit you well, I don't think you can look at either of those. You need to look at them in 35. But the issue that you have with a lot of the teams that double in 34 is obviously none of them double in 37, but most of them also don't have good fixtures from 35 to 38 either. So it is very, very difficult to decide what to do. I've tried to just roughly say here the order of priority and sort of the teams that I would target with my transfers this week if I had no chips left. And Arsenal would still be number one. And I was hesitant to put Arsenal down, but what I'm looking at with Arsenal is they've got a double, a decent double. They've also got okay fixtures from 35 to 38. They're not great, but they're not terrible. And I actually think that I'd be happy playing my Arsenal assets pretty much every week. because most of them are very, very nailed, the assets that you want. With Liverpool, there's rotation left, right, and centre. With Arsenal, you know that your player's going to play most of the time. I expect them to still be in a title race at least until about game week 37, maybe 36, but probably 37 at the very least. And so I just think they will serve you well for the remainder of the season. So not only do you get to target the double this week, but you've also got assets that you can rely upon. If you just had to start Gabriel for every remaining game week this season, that would be absolutely fine. If you had to keep Saka and you couldn't move to someone like a Foden or a Gordon, again, would probably be fine as well. So I would have Arsenal as my number one priority. Make sure that you've got 3 Arsenal in your team. After that, I actually think Man United and Newcastle will be next for me. And the reason for this is they have some of the best fixtures from 35 to 38. They double in 37, but they've also got good fixtures in 34 as well. Man United in particular have Sheffield United at home, arguably the best fixture of game week 34. So no, they don't double, but could Bruno Fernandes outscore someone like a Luis Diaz this week? I don't think he will, but he absolutely could in theory. If he gets a penalty and an assist, Luis Diaz has to get like 2 attacking returns to match him, and that isn't a given, especially with the limited minutes that we're expecting from the Liverpool attackers. It's the same for pretty much everyone else. So I would say that Man United may well be the second team that I would target, because they've got Sheffield United this week, then they've got Burnley, I think it's then Palace, double, and then they finish with like Brentford or Brighton. It's a really, really nice run of fixtures. And Newcastle are a similar story. They've not got the best fixture this week against Palace away. If it was Palace at home, I'd feel much better. But they could still get something, the likes of Isak, Gordon, even a defender. Then next week, they've got Sheffield United at home, which is the fixture Man United have this week. After that, they've then got Burnley away. So I actually think the next 3 fixtures for Man United and Newcastle are the same. I think it's Palace, Sheffield United, Burnley, just in different orders. And then they both have the double in 37. So I would argue that if I was chipless, I would probably target Man United and Newcastle ahead of the likes of Crystal Palace, Liverpool, and some of the other teams that double this week. I've then put Man City in 4th just because they're Man City and they've got some really decent assets. Could Gvardiol keep a clean sheet this week? Absolutely. Could Foden pop off again and outscore some of the doublers? He definitely could. So, and again, they double in 37. They've got good remaining fixtures and they are still going for the league. They're in pole position, but they'll prioritise the league ahead of anything else. They're now out of the Champions League too. So Man City have to be considered. And then I would still have Liverpool in 5th. Let's say that you've got 3 Arsenal. You've already got a team that you're happy with for the remainder of the season. You've got a couple of Man United and Newcastle. Well, then, yeah, if you've only got 1 Liverpool or something like that, bringing in a Van Dijk or a Luis Diaz or someone like that could serve you really well. But I guess if I was chipless, I wouldn't hesitate to bring in single game week players this week. I guess that's the key thing. Let me know down below. If you've got no remaining chips, who are the players that you're bringing in this week? Lots of questions flying in around Bench Boost 34, and we've discussed in quite a bit of detail in recent weeks the value of bench boosting in certain game weeks and whether it is worth saving it for 37, but I thought I'd approach it once more here because lots of people are maybe looking at their team this week and thinking, I've got 1 or 2 free transfers, my team's close to a bench boost, maybe not as perfect as it would be on paper in 37, but is it worth playing it this week? And I don't think it's as easy as just saying, we'll just compare the 2 bench boosts and whichever one looks better, because there are so many nuances. The bench boost is not just about the week that you bench boost. It's about the surrounding weeks. If you bench boost now and you're wildcarding in 35, well, that means in your wildcard 35, you don't have to worry about having 15 doublers. You can maybe hold on to some of your Arsenal players, which could be really good, maybe even a Liverpool player if you wanted to. So it's not just the week that you bench boost, it's the weeks around that. Maybe if you've already wildcarded, the argument would be if you wait until 37, you're waiting for even further weeks away from when you've wildcarded, even more could go wrong with injuries. So I don't think it's as simple as just looking at the 2, but a few things to note, and I've said this in recent weeks, so I'll fly through it. Benches are unpredictable. Even if your bench looks absolutely rubbish, it could still score 40 points. If your bench looks absolutely perfect, it could still score you 10. It's the same with your FPL team as well. So just because your bench doesn't look perfect, and I might say I wouldn't bench boost, if you're feeling it, go for it. The most important thing for me when you're looking at a bench boost is, can you guarantee 15 starts, or at least are you very likely to get 15 starts? My issue is I've seen a lot of people saying, would you bench boost this? And they're sending me a team with like 5 flagged players and rotation risks with 1 fixture. And it's just like, I could see a world where only 12 of your players start or get any minutes. I guess the thing rather than the starts is any minutes, right? Because if they get minutes off the bench, especially in your starting 11, then you wouldn't need your bench regardless. But if you've got players with like 1 fixture that is flagged or 2 fixtures that you don't know if they're going to feature at all, it just makes me much less likely to want to use it. The next thing is, have you already used your wildcard? Because like I said, if you're wildcarding 35, it does make more sense to bench boost in 37 because you can wildcard to set that up. But the alternative argument is, yeah, if you wildcard in 35 without the bench boost, you can have less money on your bench, or you can get away with benching Arsenal, Liverpool assets that other people that are bench boosting 37 won't be able to have. So you need to think about that too. And also, in Game Week 37, who's to say you won't have further issues? Even if you wildcard in 35, you could wildcard in 35, get 4 injuries in Game Week 35, 2 injuries in Game Week 36, and you're looking at it and you're like, I'd need like a -12 to even get a bench here. So if you've got a bench in front of you now that looks okay, you at least know what's in front of you, it's not the worst idea. So what I've done here is I just asked over on Twitter very quickly before making this graphic for a few people to send in their teams and their benches to get my opinion on would I bench boost. Obviously, I can't do this for everyone, but hopefully going through these 2 teams, if it's similar to yours, will give you a bit of an idea around what I would bench boost. So the first team is the one on the left. They've got 2 free transfers and wildcard 35. At the moment, their starting 11, when I look at it, I would be very surprised if anyone in their starting 11 doesn't get some minutes at least. Like if they miss out altogether, which means they won't need their bench to sub on for them unless they get very, very unlucky. So that's a good thing about it. But when I look at their bench, it's not in an ideal position, right? Areola is a bit of a doubt. We don't know whether he'll be available. But even if he is, it's only a single fixture here, which isn't particularly great. Palmer against Arsenal is fine, but he is playing the best defence in the league, and it's away from home. But he is on penalties, and it is Cole Palmer. So I don't mind the idea of benching with Cole Palmer. I think that's absolutely fine. And Haaland's on the bench. Now, in a normal situation, I'd say Haaland on the bench is pretty good, but he's a bit of a doubt. So immediately, you've got 2 players that are a doubt there. Palmer against Arsenal away. The other player on the bench is Kirkes. I think Kirkes will probably actually start both of these, so I don't necessarily hate that. But then when I do actually glance at the starting 11 as well, you've got Joe Gomez in there. Not the best asset. Probably he's only going to start 1. Zabani's fine, but not much attacking threat. Garnacho, I suppose, is a slight doubt, given the fact that obviously he's recently upset Ten Hag, although that seems to be over now. With 2 free transfers, what could you do with this? You could do Areola to Henderson, and I suppose if you don't want to risk him not starting, you could do something like Haaland to Mateta. You would then probably, if you did that, maybe start Henderson ahead of Pickford. Pickford would drop to the bench. Maybe you'd start Mateta instead of Gordon or Garnacho, or maybe even maybe Joe Gomez actually I'd probably start. So your bench would then be Henderson, Palmer, Joe Gomez, and Kirkes. I would say that just about qualifies for a bench boost, but it's very close. And if you preferred your bench in 37, I'd still maybe be tempted to keep it. But for me, that is one where I'd say like 60-40 in favour of yes, I'm fine playing it. Because if you take out Areola and Haaland, I think all 15 players will get minutes of some kind. I don't think there are many risks outside of that. So that would be okay. The one on the right, maybe slightly more of an issue. So this one's got 1 free transfer. But I just think a few things that would make me maybe edge towards saying no here. So Kelleher's not going to get any minutes on the bench. Garnacho's fine. Gusto's got Arsenal, but I guess if you're wildcarding 35, you can take him out, but I wouldn't want a bench boost with Gusto. Then you've got Branthwaite and Ait-Nouri and Haaland that are all flagged, and obviously Foden, who you just never know at the moment if he's going to start and get minutes. Let's say that we think Haaland will start anyway. Even if Haaland's fine, Ait-Nouri, I think he'll get some minutes against Arsenal, maybe start against Bournemouth, but we also thought he would start in Game Week 33. Branthwaite, we think, will maybe start. But then you've also got Kelleher and Gusto. So even if with your 2 free transfers, you took out Kelleher and you took out Gusto, let's say you've got money in the bank and you can even do like Henderson in and, I don't know, like a Tarkowski in or a Munoz in or something like that. It's still a little bit of a risk that you've just got a few players that aren't quite there for me. So I think for me, rather than bench boost in this case, if you've got 1 free transfer, I would be tempted to just do something like Haaland to Mateta or Ait-Nouri to a slightly better defender for this week. If you've got lots of money in the bank, something like a Van Dijk. So for me, I think the one on the left is borderline, but maybe just about a bench boost. The one on the right isn't quite there for me. So again, that probably didn't help loads of you, but it should give you a bit of an idea about how I'm weighing up whether it's worth playing a bench boost. The key thing for me is working out when you've got your other chips to play. Can you guarantee 15 starts or at least minutes for all 15 players? And is there another way that you could use your transfers this week if you decided not to bench boost, where you feel like it could benefit your starting 11 and also the surrounding weeks as well? So there's lots to think about. I'd love to know down below, is anyone considering the bench boost this week? And if so, what is your bench currently looking like? So we've obviously spoken about free hits a lot this week, and if you have not yet seen, this is actually a double upload day for me. I've already uploaded this morning my free hit team selection, and it is currently unchanged apart from one player that I'll discuss in a second. But if you do want a bit of a free hit discussion, here it is. So what I've got on the screen is my current free hit draft, which is the leftmost team on the graphic, and then the one closest to me on the right is what I would call like the template optimal draft. So what I did is I put a tweet out over on X or Twitter, and I asked people for their free hit drafts. I've also gone around to a few of the different algorithms and just looked at what they seem to be favoring as the best draft. And just on paper, if I'm following the data and just really trying to build the optimal team, what would it look like? So here are the two teams, and they are very, very similar. I would say that I don't think you should go without triple Liverpool and triple Arsenal. I think that would be unwise to do on a free hit. You could back against it, and you could do very well, because we saw last week, Arsenal and Liverpool both flopped horribly, so it can happen, but it wouldn't make much sense for me. And you can see both drafts, and pretty much all of my drafts have had 3 Crystal Palace as well. I don't think you necessarily need 3 Crystal Palace. I think 2 would be absolutely fine, but I wouldn't have less than 2, because I do think that on paper, fixtures and strength of the team, Palace are probably the 3rd best team to invest in. And then after that, you're just filling out with maybe 1 Everton, 1 Bournemouth, something like that. So what are the similarities between the two teams? Firstly, the front line is exactly the same. So both teams have Mateta and Solanke. You could have argued for Cunha, but now I'm just... Obviously, he's out for the first game at least, so Cunha's not an option. McBurney, I've got on my bench. Maybe could squeeze him in. Obviously, Haaland is a potential option if you think he's going to play, and you can squeeze him in with the amount of money that you have available. If not there, I have no idea. Maybe Darwin, but then it's not just Darwin. You then have to sacrifice elsewhere. So really for me, Solanke and Mateta just make the most sense as that front two. I'm not saying you have to have them, but most people seem to be on that front two now. The other similarities, every draft pretty much that I've seen will have Eze, Salah, Saka, all 3 on penalties. All 3 probably have the highest expected minutes for their teams, you would imagine. And they've all got good underlying data as well. So I think Eze, Solanke, and Salah in all of the drafts that I've seen and that I've built. Interestingly, Havertz is becoming more and more popular. I would say it's like a 50-50 with Havertz. I don't think he's in like every team I've seen, but Havertz is creeping into more and more teams. And it kind of feels like everyone that's not on a free hit tends to have double Arsenal defense. So it feels like if you're going to be on your free hit and try and make the most of it and chase the upside and be a bit differential, and you don't have to go different, by the way, it just feels like going for double Arsenal defense. Like, why am I even using my free hit? I know that's not the way to view it, but it does feel a bit like that. So if there's one spot that we can differentiate from those that aren't free hitting, and it is going for double Arsenal attack rather than double defense, I think that's absolutely fine. I do really like Ødegaard, by the way. I think he's really good too, but I just fancy Havertz as the number 9 a little bit more. So my draft, and I think the optimal draft that I would build right now, probably both have Havertz. The way that they would differ, though, is that 5th midfield spot. I just want Brereton Diaz in my team. It's a bit fun. I like the double. He's got good data. But in an ideal world, I think you'd have another Liverpool attacker. And if you're not going to go for Darwin, that's probably Luis Diaz or Jota. Probably Luis Diaz's minutes are slightly more secure than Jota's. But Jota's maybe got the higher upside when he does play, because he's just an absolute monster and he scores goals for fun. So Diaz, Jota, it could be either of them. But that then obviously changes the defence, right? Because if you if you put in Luis Diaz, you can't go for double Liverpool defence. So therefore the defences are a little bit different between the two drafts. So for me, I've got Van Dijk, Saliba, Robertson, whereas I would say the ideal backline on a free hit is probably Virgil, Gabriel, and Munoz. I like the idea of having Robbo in there, right? So Robbo's going to be in my draft regardless, but I think Van Dijk's just such a safe pick for minutes that I kind of maybe back him and Brereton Diaz ahead of going for another defender and Luis Diaz. Luis Diaz has more upside than Van Dijk, of course, but I like that combination because of Van Dijk's security of minutes, and I would just love a bullet header. We know that in double game weeks, he does often get a bullet header, and that's kind of what I'm hoping for here. So I like Virgil van Dijk and Robertson. The Saliba spot is the one that I changed since my video earlier today. I'm just a bit worried about both Gabriel and White's minutes, and I'm probably completely off the mark, definitely with Gabriel, right? Everyone would tell me I'm being an idiot. Gabriel won't be rested. I don't know why. I just got a feeling Kivior might play a game. And even if Kivior doesn't play a game, let's say Gabriel gets 90 in both, which is probably more likely than not. Gabriel has been carrying some kind of issue in that he wasn't in team training for 1 day last week because it sounded like a bit of a deload day. So it might not be that it's necessarily an injury, but I certainly think out of Saliba and Gabriel, if one's going to miss a game, it is more likely to be Gabriel. Saliba seems like a bit of a fitness monster. So could I bet on maybe Gabriel missing a game? Potentially. But the other thing is, his ownership is so high. It's already at like 85%, probably going to creep even higher this week. If I only go for Gabriel as the only Arsenal defender I go for, I'm hoping that he concedes. I'm hoping that he doesn't do it. Even if he gets an attacking return, I'm gaining like nothing. I'll gain like 0.5 points from it if he gets a goal, or even less than that. It's just not worth it. So I kind of feel like I either have to go for double Arsenal defence and have Gabriel and one of Saliba or White, or if I'm only going for one Arsenal defender, unless I just want to play defensive and cover the ownership, I've kind of got to back against Gabriel. It doesn't make sense ownership-wise to go for someone that's going to gain me nothing, lose me nothing. It's just kind of that. So that's why I'm going between Saliba and White. But I just think Saliba's minutes are so secure that maybe it's worth just not taking a risk with White and Gabriel. I know this sounds like a bit of a stupid discussion, but I'd love to know down below if you're still listening at this point. By the way, thank you very much. What do you think about the idea of backing against Gabriel for that one spot? And at the moment, I've got Saliba. But in the ideal world, I think it's Gabriel. And then therefore, because I don't have a spot for Munoz, I've just gone for Henderson in goal. Right, so that's my draft. Whereas the optimal draft, because you've not got double Liverpool defence, you've got a free spot. I would put Munoz in there. He's got some really decent attacking threat. And therefore, you've got a free spot in the goalkeeper position. But you've already got triple Arsenal, triple Liverpool, and triple Palace. So I would just probably go for Pickford in there. So I think those are kind of the two sort of free hit drafts, my free hit draft and the optimal template one. I would be picking a combination of players from Liverpool, Arsenal and Palace. Which ones you want to go for, it's up to you. Like, again, Elise maybe could sneak in here instead of like Havertz, and then you go for double Arsenal defence. So like Munoz becomes White or Saliba and Havertz becomes Elise. That's probably a very good draft as well, but I'm not sure I want to back triple Palace attack. And then I guess, like I said, you could try and squeeze in a Darwin or a Jota in there if you wanted to as well, maybe an Erdegaard. But I think largely, if your team looks something like this, I think you can go into Game Week 34 feeling very happy and feel like, do you know what? I've put together a good team. Now I just need to get lucky. And I'm not saying that because like I'm salty in the... Like, FPL is so much about luck. And you have to accept that. If I come out of this with a massive green arrow, I'm not going to go, I built the best free hit draft ever. I'll say, I built a very good team that I was happy with, and I got very lucky, because you need to. When we're all selecting 9 players from 3 teams, but different combinations of them, you just have to have a bit of luck and variance on your side. So there we go. I'll leave that there. I'd love to know what you think about my free hit draft, the template one, and how your one currently differs from these two. So guys, the final thing to discuss is just around captaincy. I'm not going to do this in too much detail this week because in all honesty, I don't think this is necessarily like a stats thing. I think it's more about how you expect the games to go, your expectation of minutes, and how much you want to back historical performances. So I almost feel like this is not a vibes approach, but more like a, I don't know, using your interpretation of football, the Prem, the way the game's going, the way that the teams are performing, rather than me saying, this player's got this underlying statistic. I'm mocking myself currently. So, everyone, I think, would agree that if Salah was firing at the moment, we wouldn't even be having a chat. But Salah's not firing. And not only is Salah not firing, he doesn't look himself, and his minutes have been massively reduced. Think about it like this. In a couple of games recently, Liverpool have needed a goal and Salah's come off at like 65 minutes. That tells you that there is an issue. And I don't think it's a fitness issue. I think it's a performance issue. I don't think he's performing particularly well. It happened again against Atalanta. They're 1-0 up with 65 minutes gone. I do not buy for a single second that Salah was subbed off so that he could be kept for the Prem. Because if Liverpool score his second goal in the next 10 minutes, they need one more goal to push that game to extra time. So I don't buy for a second that Salah came off to be rested. He came off because he was rubbish, and so was Luis Diaz, to be honest. But Salah's been doing it for a few games now. And I suppose he's not rubbish, by the way, but by his own standards that he's set, he's not performing very well. So what you've now got is Salah, where his expected minutes are probably in each game between 60 and 80, not 90. So he's not going to be on penalties for the entire game because he'll come off. He's not going to get 180 minutes, at least in my opinion. And he's not finishing his chances. And to be honest, in a couple of the games, outside of the penalties, he's not even looked that likely to get that many chances. He's had a few, but something just seems off with him. And he's also got 2 away games. Fulham defend fairly well. Everton, apart from against Chelsea, defend fairly well. Something feels a little bit off about giving Salah the armband. Let me know down below if you agree with this. I just don't feel quite right giving him the armband. But the issue is, I do not see a single viable alternative. I've put my top 5 options on the screen for you right now, which is Havertz, Saka, Salah, Diaz, and Eze. Do I feel comfortable giving any of them the armband, especially ahead of Salah? Not overly. Havertz and Saka, I don't know that either of them definitely start both. And again, are they going to get early subs? Maybe. I don't love the double game week in terms of fixtures. And, I mean, Saka himself, his minutes have been fairly reduced. And his underlying data recently has been pretty rubbish as well. Outside the pen that he scored recently, he's not been getting that many returns. So, I don't know. I just look at, and then I don't really like those 2 Arsenal assets. Luis Diaz, I don't know. He'll start both either. And if I'm backing Luis Diaz to score goals and Liverpool to score goals, well, then I'll just revert back to Salah. So, I would say the only genuine viable alternative that I've gone kind of makes a bit more sense is Eze. But when I say it out loud, captaining a Crystal Palace player ahead of Salah in a double game week, it's just bonkers to me. But Eze's data is quite good. I would argue he's got a better double game week from an attacking perspective. His expected minutes are probably slightly higher as well. And so you could absolutely captain him. I suppose my slight issue with Eze is, one, I don't think that the team data is as important as individual data, but could you see Palace just dropping a couple of stinkers, or one stinker and then one okay performance? I guess Liverpool could as well, but you feel slightly more comfortable backing a team that consistently put up a lot of chances, which Liverpool do. The other issue with Eze, that I don't know that he's definitely on pens. Elise did take a penalty when Eze was on the pitch earlier in the season, but Eze only came on like a minute or two before that penalty was given. So even with Eze, I think there are issues associated with him that I still don't feel fully comfortable captaining him. So this is the process that I'm going through. I look at my team and I'm like, the captaincy doesn't look right on Salah this week. And then I take it off him, and then I go to move it around, and I'm like, well, that person's an issue, and this person's an issue, and then I just end up reverting back to Salah. So there you go. I probably haven't helped you at all there, but I suppose my thing here is that I don't see a viable alternative. I suppose Solanke probably deserves to be on this screen, actually. But 2 away fixtures, he's got the worst underlying data out of all of the forwards that double in GameWeek 34 over the last 6. Solanke's just not been in the right form, I suppose you could say, in recent weeks. So, yeah, let me know down below if you're backing anyone else ahead of Mohamed Salah, or if you're just going to revert to him. I think I would just really kick myself if I tried to be a bit clever, captained Eze, and Salah just decided this is when he's going to start scoring goals again and he gets like 4 or 5 goals. I'd really kick myself because I'd be like, that was an unnecessary risk to take. But this does feel, final thing on this does feel like a really good opportunity, because I think a lot of people will be the same as me, where they'll just say, do you know what? No, I don't want to captain Salah, but there aren't, again, many viable alternatives. Let me just give him the armband. And in that position, he's going to be very highly owned. There are some seriously other good options. For me, I'm looking at it as Salah, Eze, Havertz for my current free hit draft. Don't ask me why, but that's sort of the order that I'm looking at the moment. I'd love to know down below who you captaining for GameWeek 34. So guys, there you have it. That is my GameWeek 34 deadline decisions video. I hope you did enjoy it. And if it was useful for you today, please do smash that like button and make sure to subscribe as well if you still haven't done so. I will be live for the deadline stream tomorrow, but it's a later deadline. It's a 1:30 deadline, so I won't start streaming until 11:30 a.m. UK time, 2 hours before the deadline. So it's a slightly later stream tomorrow. Make sure to tune into that. But until next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.